My name is Julie Ann Link, and welcome to the Music Link. This week on the Let's Link project, I'd like to welcome the creator and administrator of the social networking platform for bassoonists identifying as female called fEMPOWER, author of Bassoon Reed Making, and on the faculty of bassoon at Ithaca College in New York, Dr. Christin Schillinger. Thank you so much for being here, Christin.
Thanks for having me. This is such an honor.
Christin and I met about 15 years ago at Arizona State University while she was visiting for a master class and concert with the bassoon studio there. So Christin, just to start out, could you please share with us an overview of who you are and what you do as a professional musician?
Yeah, I think this answer of like, who am I? I think we're all figuring this out continuously in our life. For me, first and foremost, I'm a teacher, and all of my performance and my scholarship, I'm a recording artist and I'm an author, but all of this is centered for me around pedagogy and hoping to empower the next generation of musicians and bassoonists to find their path and feel comfortable walking down that path and to feel supported.
Beautiful, Christin. Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing, and would love to hear, could you tell us where you grew up?
Yeah, I am an Oklahoman at heart. I was born and raised in Tulsa, and actually the little snippet I like to say because it's so touching to me, when I was a toddler, I went and saw David McGill play with the Tulsa Philharmonic when he played there. He was only there a couple of years, but it's just burned into my mind, those experiences. I spent my high school years at a small farm town west of Oklahoma City called El Reno, Oklahoma. And so a pretty rural, small background.
Wow. So how did you get introduced to playing music and the bassoon?
Oklahoma, like Texas and Kansas and the South, band is life, band and football, right? And I'm a girl, football wasn't really a thing. So, and I'm also coming from a musical family. My grandfather actually went to Oberlin on a full trumpet scholarship.
Wow.
I know, and I have some of his music textbooks from when he was at Oberlin. We're talking like 1920s, 1930s, and it's so fascinating. There's an entire book about how he as a male was supposed to behave around females. But I grew up, as I said, being taken to the symphony by my parents. The classical music radio station was on constantly in our house. My brother and sister who are older than me, went through band orchestra programs. So it was expected that that's what I would do as well. But unlike my brother and sister who went into corporate America, with me, it really stuck. And music just became such an inseparable part of my identity.
Could you share with us where you went to college and what the music programs were like?
So I was very lucky that when I lived in Oklahoma, even though I lived in this very rural part, I was in driving distance to Oklahoma University. So during my high school years, I was blessed to study with Carl Rath, who is just spectacular. Yeah, he's so wonderful. And I can see in my pedagogy and in my teaching now so much influence from my early days with Carl, which is so exciting. He always puts a great emphasis on fun and community and a non-competitive environment. And I see all of that in how I teach. That said, after growing up in Oklahoma, and especially where I lived, where in my particular school, I was the only person in my band, for example, that was in private lessons. I was the only person in my band that did like an outside youth orchestra, right? So I loved my high school. I had great friends, but they weren't interested in the same thing I was interested in. And also being from this small rural area, I really wanted to go see the big bad world. I wanted a strikingly different culture. And so I was accepted to and went to Northwestern in Chicago for my undergrad. And that was a seminal experience in my development as a bassoonist, as a scholar, everything. Then I went, I don't know if you know this or not, but I went and studied with Barry Stees. At the time, he was at Michigan State. Yeah, I got him whilst he was auditioning for Cleveland, is when I was studying with him. So it was so interesting to be with him at that time. Um, it also allowed me the opportunity, because of course he took the Cleveland job. Yeah. It allowed me the opportunity to study with Michael Croft.
Wow.
And to see they're both unbelievable, amazing teachers and players, but they approach music very differently. And to have both inputs within a 2-year span, really influenced me to think about, how do I think about music? Mm-hmm. That it helped me realize there's not a right way, but rather there's many right ways, and what locks in for me. Mm-hmm. And from there, I went and studied with Jeff Lyman at Arizona State. Yeah, we got all the links here. No pun intended. So yeah, and I did my doctorate at Arizona State, which was a fantastic experience.
Wonderful, Christin. Could you share more about how they influenced you, all of your teachers?
Yeah, as I said, I know a lot of people kind of talk about their teachers starting in college, but for me, Carl Rath, it was so influential in how I view music. Yes. That music, first and foremost, is community building.
Yes.
Community building with us and the audience, community building with us and the composers, whether dead or alive, right? And community building with us and the people we're making music with. And that I learned from him, and it has always stayed with me and always been a core tenet of my life as a musician. With Bob Barris, who is my teacher at Northwestern, he's since passed, I really learned the importance of fundamentals. And I learned the importance of it. It doesn't matter if you can do the technique of Jolivet if you can't produce a consistent tone in every range. If you don't understand how to play dynamics, in every range. If you don't, so I really, with Professor Barris, I really learned the importance of fundamentals. I also from him learned the importance of being a lifelong mentor. Up until the day he died, I knew that I could call him at any moment. I also knew he was following my career, and he would often, like if he was alive, he would watch this and call me and say, "Hey, I really liked your interview. I noticed you said this. You may think next time about saying this." Like the consummate teacher for my life. And that has stayed with me. And I always tell my students, at Ithaca, we call ourselves Ithaca Bassoon University. And I always say, once a Bassoon University member, always a Bassoon University member, meaning the community lasts for forever, but so does my mentorship. I really took that to heart. It meant an endless amount to me. With Barry Stees, I learned so much from him. He's one of the greatest musicians out there. But I have to say the thing I learned most was pedagogy. It was the first time that I looked at pedagogy as an actual art within itself. Not this thing that I was just, being done while I'm playing, but like something that you actually think very critically about, how does this student learn and how can I enhance that? And how is that different than this student here? And what are 5 different ways that you can teach vibrato? And what are 10 different ways that you can teach embouchure if somebody doesn't understand it the first time? And I really got sent down that path from Barry Stees. He's so good about not just telling you to do something, but always explaining why. It's not just, your tone is bright, but here's why this is problematic. Here's why we don't want it to be this bright. And that is most definitely a very critical aspect of my own teaching. Is I never simply tell my students to do something. I always help them understand why we're after a certain skill. With Mike Croth, my learning took a completely different path. Whereas Barry studied with Van Hoosen, Mike Croth studied with Garfield.
Wow.
And so I'm so grateful for the 1 year I have with Mike Croth, because we delved so deeply into the musical teachings of Tabuto. And I mean, that 100% changed how I played music, how I viewed music. And for me, I have a background in music theory. My undergrad is in both performance and theory.
Wow.
And it finally locked the two innately and intimately together.
Wow.
And one of the strengths I feel in my teaching is getting my students to not just play musically, but to be able to create independent interpretations and to be able to defend why they're doing something. And I feel the beginning of that really came from that year with Croth and, you know, his teaching of the Tabuto system. Jeff Lyman, not to leave him out, Jeff Lyman, for me, and there's a lot more models of this now, but when I entered my doctorate, there were not so many models of this. Jeff Lyman is a rugged individualist. If he's interested in something, he pursues it. He pursues it with scholarship. He pursues it with performance. And in a field, and it's changing now, but when I was in school, in a field that was so much orchestral playing and you know, these very small list of standard rep, it was so refreshing to me to see this amazing performer say, you know, I'm interested in the music of Mexico, so I'm going to research it and play it.
Yes.
And that really taught me and modeled for me that I can be myself in this field, that I don't need to fit somebody else's model of what a bassoonist should be, but that I can create my own.
So did you always know that you wanted to go into music for a career?
I started bassoon when I was in middle school at 13. And I think for for middle school, it was very much my time for myself. It was a release. It was an escape. And when I hit high school, I remember my fall concert, freshman year in high school with my youth orchestra. We played Beethoven's Fifth. And I remember sitting in that concert with goosebumps thinking, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And that I didn't necessarily mean playing an orchestra. I just meant this synergy, this synergy of bassoon and music and musicians and audience and that. And it wasn't shaped out. I didn't know I would be a bassoon teacher. I just knew music, you know, that was my path, and I never looked back.
Wow.
And I never have.
Christin, are there any tips or advice that you could share around what you've learned about the music industry since working professionally?
I think coming off of that, as I said before, I have two siblings that are older than me that are both in corporate America. And it's easy in music. We are not as well funded as other fields. We are we're not as generally respected in this country as other fields. For example, Europe, right? And I think it's easy sometimes to question the value of what you do. And for me, I always think back again to that concert when I was 14, and I think about the power that was in that room, the power that transcended race, transcended gender, transcended political beliefs. And I believe wholly that music has that power, and I want to be a part of it.
Yes.
In whatever way I can. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you have.
Okay.
It's a beautiful reminder of perspective and the meaning of what we do in music.
Yeah, and if we don't, I talked about kind of the value of it. We all know the value.
Yes.
We understand that. And if we're not advocating it, if we're not standing up and saying, look, if we're not creating those experiences I had when I was 14, if we're not creating those experiences for new generations, well, that's really problematic. So, with every concert I give, with every interview I give, with every, that for me is first and foremost on my agenda, is simply to convey my enthusiasm and my passion.
Wow.
So that it can kind of hopefully spread to, even if one more person, I'd be elated.
Could you share with us about your teaching career?
So, as I said before, when I was in my master's degree with Barry Stees, that's really when I figured out that teaching, that's my bag. That it's, I love it. I love helping students find their voice and then helping them find the confidence and the skills to lean into that voice and to have confidence in the uniqueness and the authenticity of that voice. My teaching philosophy is most definitely one of creativity and critical thought.
Yes.
I don't want to create a bunch of mini-me's. I don't want a bunch of students to go out and sound like me and talk like me and play like me, but rather I want them to find what they sound like and what's important to them, and to have the skills to research it and promote it and talk about it and perform it.
Could you share with us more about your chamber music career?
Yeah. So advocacy, as you mentioned in the beginning, is really important to me. In my career, advocacy has taken two paths. One, and in the beginning of my career, and it continues to this day, I have a great passion for the music of today. Every generation, every era builds from the era before, right? And so to me, the music of today, there's so much opportunity, and there's so many explorations of sound and texture and timbre, and I love it. And so from the beginning of my career, I've been a great advocate for living composers. And the way that transfers into chamber music, my first CD, Bassoon Surrounded, was bassoon and percussion. And at that point in time, that was unheard of. I think on Trevco Music at the time, there was maybe a piece for bassoon and percussion. I mean, nobody. And so I'm really so pleased that now there's multiple standing bassoon and percussion duos. There's so much music constantly being written for it. But that was really a huge experience for me, working with my percussionist, Andy Hegland. We worked together for, 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
My most recent experience with chamber music at the professional level, I mean, more than, freelancing with colleagues and whatnot at different universities, I co-founded the Limitless Collective, which is an ensemble of all women. And I like to stress, not just are we all women, but we're women of different shapes, different sizes, different sexual preferences, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, we are actually strikingly different, but we come together in this need to share music, and we're all very pedagogically based. So in this need to educate, and in this need to promote diversity in music. And so our program, we've been on hiatus during the pandemic, but our programming, we seek to flip the paradigm. The existing paradigm of performances is roughly 90% Baroque, classical, romantic, and then 10% living composers. And because of that, you get 90% Western European Caucasian men as your composers, and 10% other, right? And so our aim in our programming is to flip that. We still have, we still play Baroque, classical, romantic, but instead of it being 90% of our repertoire, it's 10%.
Wow.
And the other 90%, we actively seek out works by women, works by people of color, works by the LGBTQ community. And especially, we're really focusing on works by emerging composers, young composers, where it's really hard for them to get premieres.
Wow. Wonderful, Christin. Could you share with us about your orchestra career?
Yeah. I learned pretty early on that my passion is not in orchestral playing. I like orchestral playing. I like it. But in the same way, a lot of people say, oh, I hate solo playing. Oh, I love solo playing. Love it. But orchestral playing, I like going in as a freelancer and playing a cycle. I really enjoy that. And so for me, it's something I sought out in the beginning of my career because I felt like I had to, right? I felt like this was the expectation. I'm a bassoonist. I should be contracted in orchestras. So I won my auditions. I was contracted in orchestras, but I just never felt, I talked about authenticity. I never felt authentic. I never felt true to myself.
Yes.
When I was playing in those roles. So, when I moved to Ohio for my second university job, I just never took any more auditions. I just, and I also don't put my resume out as a freelancer. By the nature of being a college professor, I get called to freelance fairly frequently, but it's not something that I've actively pursued in many years. And I have to say, I am grateful to be at the point in the evolution of our field as bassoonists that I can have a career and make that decision.
Yes. Do you have a favorite concert experience that you've performed in or attended that you could share with us?
I think there are those people in the world who are our musical soulmates. Who, when I'm going to try not to cry here, when you make music with them, your hearts are one. And my musical soulmate was the late pianist Jed Moss. Excuse me.
Wow, Christin.
Every concert I played with him is my favorite.
Yes. Wow. Are there some recordings that we can look up? Listen to. Okay, I would love to go listen and check those out.
He's amazing. The first CD I had, I mentioned, was bassoon and percussion. My next two CDs were bassoon and piano, and he was the pianist on both.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing about him.
Bassoon Transcended and Bassoon Unbounded.
Wonderful. Do you have any tips or advice on how to cope with music performance anxiety, if that's something that you've experienced?
So if Bob Barris was still alive, boy, could he tell you stories. I had debilitating performance anxiety when I was in college, on into my master's degree. Somebody else can psychoanalyze why, if that's even possible. What changed it for me is when I started thinking about, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to be perfect? So I'll use the example. I just gave my first live performance about maybe 3 weeks ago. My first live performance in over a year. And I walked out on stage, and I usually don't feel nerves at this point, but it just washed over me. There was an audience and there were the lights, and I hadn't experienced that in a year. And there was no one else on the stage with me because it was an unaccompanied recital. And which in itself, as we all know, is kind of a and I took a deep breath and I reminded myself, why am I giving this concert? Am I giving this concert to be the best bassoonist? No. Am I giving this concert to be perfect? No. I'm giving this concert, I was masked, And I was giving this concert to stand in solidarity with my students
Mm.
having to do all their own performances masked
Yes.
during this time of COVID. And then for me, on a personal note, I injured myself, and I was doing this concert to force myself to get back in shape after such a severe injury.
Right.
And once I kind of reminded myself, what is my agenda?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I've achieved my agenda. I was able to relax.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're all, not all of us, a lot of us are drawn to music because it is this nebulous, unachievable form,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's something it's the unfinishable puzzle,
Yes.
that you're going to be working on for the rest of your life. And I think that's really appealing to us because we can keep growing and learning and honing and polishing. But at the same time, the higher you develop your skills, the higher you've developed your ear and the more aware you are of things that aren't perfect, so to speak. And I think that can be absolutely damaging to the psyche. And I think it's so important for us to remember, first of all, that everyone makes mistakes, everyone. And second of all, that to get in touch with why are we doing this? What is our mission for this concert?
Yes.
Because rarely is somebody's mission, well, my mission is to be perfect.
Christin, could you share with us a bit more about any music-related injuries and how to be more aware when those things are coming up and how to take care and make sure that they're not long-term?
I'm a pretty rigorous practicer. I'm very much about isolating the problem and surgically dealing with it.
Yes.
And so it's a lot of repetition, a lot of metronome work, a lot of, I'm trying to fit as high of a quality into whatever quantity I have. And so nowadays I don't really deal with much injury because I have no quantity of time to practice in my job. But when I was younger in my career and I was practicing 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and I'm doing all of this metronome work and grueling, I often had tendonitis issues. I had shoulder issues. And this sounds weird to say, but I'm grateful I went through that because now I'm able to recognize it in my students and know how to help them.
Yes.
First and foremost, I have dramatically changed my posture from when I was in school. We learn posture when we're young, and then slowly we all kind of like,
yep.
and so I'm really anal retentive about my posture. I'm also anal retentive about my equipment. For many years, I was on an instrument that was just way too heavy for me. I'm a small boned female, and a lot of the instruments nowadays with there's an instrument, they put trill keys on everything and every extra key you can imagine, and double lacquer and gentleman's joints, and it's great, it's souped up, it's wonderful, but I don't have the musculature of a man, and that's okay to recognize.
Yes.
And so for me, switching, that's part of the reason I started looking for my current instrument. I play a 10,000 series Heckel now.
Great.
And the difference of weight is astronomical. And that is, so equipment helps, vocal angle, what kind of seat strap you use, where your seat strap is on your chair, like all of these things really help. And then also, I'm still a fan of quality practicing, not noodling, but I'm really big on breaks. Practice for 45 minutes, get on Facebook for 15 minutes, or whatever the social media trend of the day is.
Yeah, great advice, Christin. Could you tell us more about your reed making style and any techniques?
One of the great things about studying with the teachers that I studied with is they all had a different reed style, a reed scrape.
Mm-hmm.
All were thinner, smaller reeds. So
Mm-hmm.
that was nice, but they were all quite different. When I started studying with Croth, his reeds, he plays on a true Garfield reed, and Stee's plays on a true Van Hosen reed, and
Mm-hmm.
they were so strikingly different.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to understand why. And so it was during that teacher switch that I started researching the differences between scrapes and why people do which scrape. And I also started making, for about a 2-year period, I would have both scrapes in my case. And I would go back and forth, and I would find with the Garfield, I would get really frustrated that it didn't do X, Y, or Z. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd play on the Van Heusen, but then I would play on that and I'd get frustrated that it didn't do A, B, or C. And
Mm-hmm.
so I um, felt the freedom with Jeff Lyman,
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't, at least with the grad students, he didn't really, make us, we did what we wanted. I
Uh-huh.
felt the freedom to figure out what was best for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually play on my own style, which is a hybrid of the two.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's bigger than a Garfield reed and thicker than a Garfield reed, but it has the channels cleared out. And it has, instead of the nice triangle tip, it is a blended thumbnail. And
Wow.
I find this enables me to get the instantaneous response and the extreme dynamics I wanted, but it also allows me to have this really fat core and great projection
Uh-huh.
that I had with the other.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's where my read style lies now, and it's what I teach. And if anybody's interested in knowing more about it, there's YouTube videos of every step of me making a read for my students, and there's also like worksheets on my website.
Great. Mm. What are important skills learned through music that apply to everyday life that you could share with us?
So I think first and foremost, time management.
Mm.
There are few fields that at the college level especially have as much going on at a time with as many disparate deadlines. You'll have a concert tomorrow on the Stravinsky Octet, but then you've got Schubert Unfinished on Friday, and then you've got, it's just, and being able to look at the music and identify how much practice time each piece needs, how to allocate practice time to make sure you hit everything, and to
Mm.
be prepared for every rehearsal, to keep track of your schedules, because a musician's schedule is not 9 to 5. So first and foremost, time management.
Mhm.
Along with that, self-discipline.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's a lot of that, right? You have to be able to sit in a practice room by yourself without a teacher breathing down your neck and play scales.
Mhm.
You got to force yourself to do it.
Mhm.
Um, and then I would also add to that collaboration,
Mhm.
the ability to work with others.
Mhm.
And that can't be overstated, because I think in other fields that you can have a really bright person who does the job really well, but doesn't take criticism very well, or
Mm.
doesn't work with others well. And we as musicians, we've been doing that since we were 5,
Yes.
right?
Uh-huh.
We know how to deal with that. And so, yeah, I think music is a fantastic field to train people for any direction they want to go in their career.
Mhm. Is there any advice that you could share for musicians just starting out their music careers?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice I would say is to find your voice, to not get stuck following the path you think you should follow,
Mhm.
or that maybe, the field you kind of feel the field is telling you to follow, but rather figure out what is important to you, what issues are important to you, what are your values, and let that guide your path. If you're able to do that, I'll put it this way: no matter how sick I am, no matter what a bad day I've had, no matter if it's snowing at the end of April. I sit down in my office with a student to teach a lesson, and I'm on cloud nine
Yes.
because that's me being true to me is being a teacher. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think my biggest advice is to students is to be open
Mm-hmm.
to your voice.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone that you would be interested to suggest to be interviewed next for this project?
You know, you've interviewed so many amazing people. Obviously, my teachers, which I think you've now interviewed all of them. But I have to say, there's two women
Mm-hmm.
that have been particularly instrumental in my career,
Mm-hmm.
and that's Janis McKay, who teaches at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas,
Wow.
and MaryBeth Minnis, who
Mm-hmm.
teaches at Central Michigan University. Both of them are trailblazers and
Mm-hmm.
they're just beautiful people, beautiful players, fantastic scholars, and I think would be wonderful additions to your roster.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
Yeah, thank
Yeah, I
you.
really appreciate your time and thank you for the chance to get a glimpse into your life and
Yeah.
career. You're amazing. So,
Oh, likewise. I can't stress enough how impressed I am with this series. I think it's wonderful.
thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
For everyone tuning in, keep an eye out for two events held every week on the Music Link. Every Thursday, Central Daylight Time, a new YouTube video launches, and every Sunday, Central Daylight Time, is a live Zoom group discussion session with great new guests every week that you can register for on the Music Link website. Check out Kristen's hosting session coming up this Sunday, where she's sharing more around how you can be your own advocate in music and life, all about fEMPOWER and the importance of women in music, IDRS, the International Double Reed Society, and the evolution of women's participation, and career advice on how to navigate the music industry, and so much more. Find out more about Kristen at her website at schillingerbassoon.com, where she shares wonderful bassoon resources and more about the great work that she's doing. Please like, comment, and share any questions or feedback in the section below, and subscribe to this channel for notifications,
Yeah.
which really helps keep the Music Link moving forward. Check out the Instagram and Facebook pages too for more information. The Music Link is a New Zealand-based online resource for people to share, learn, and connect. Thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video.